Hey, it's Lynn Galadner, and this is the Make Meaning podcast. I am a writer and an entrepreneur, and through decades of writing articles for magazines and newspapers and authoring books, I've wondered what makes life meaningful and what makes work worth doing. In my day job, I help schools and universities, entrepreneurs, and leaders learn how to market and grow their reach. You can learn more about my company, Your People, at yourppl.com. I also am a writing coach, and I teach my signature Find Your Voice Writers Workshop through writingworkshops.com and at makemeaning.org. I help people, organizations, and movements find their voice and gain the confidence to use it. Because everything we do means something. Why waste your moments? You are needed. You can make the world better. And by caring about the people you encounter and the tasks you take on, you get closer every day to finding your unique meaning and living life with purpose. This podcast focuses on all the many ways people make meaning in the mundane. You'll hear stories of courageous people daring to imagine a life they love. If you like what you hear, give us a review on any of the podcast platforms you find this show. There are many ways to fill your life with meaning. Join us at makemeaning.org to learn more. Now, on to the show. Dean Stark is one of the most successful high school basketball coaches, leading Sacramento Waldorf School's team to 635 wins and 16 conference titles in 34 years of coaching. In his second book, Uncommon: Inside My Coaching Career at Sacramento Waldorf, Dean shares his journey to a coaching career that aligns with the principles and philosophies of Waldorf education and which empowers him and his players to reach great heights. Dean's approach to competition is unlike what most school sport environments may be. He shares his philosophy on motivating players as opposed to focusing solely on winning, and emphasizes constant personal improvement over racing to the top and burning out in the process. He also shares insights from his players and from his colleagues and from his mentors on the job he's doing and the perspective he brings. I know Dean personally from my days managing marketing for Sacramento Waldorf School, and I admire his zeal for life and his commitment to compassionate leadership. I am thrilled to welcome him today to the Make Meaning podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really an honor. I'm sort of a fangirl of Sac Waldorf and like everything you guys do out there. And so I was really excited to read your book and to get more in depth with sort of how you do what you do. I mean, it was remarkable to me when I was working with Sacramento Waldorf in marketing and public relations that for such a small school, an independent school, you have such an amazing athletic track record. And so I loved reading your book about how you approach coaching, how your career has been. And it was really remarkable to me that, at the end of your book, you say that you began the job at Sac Waldorf at the age of 21 with no vision other than to get some experience before moving on to a bigger school, and yet you've stayed for a really long time. So what I'd like to start with is to hear you tell me why you stayed and what you learned about your own career and your goals along the way.
Yeah. Why I stayed, it's like you said, I had no intention of staying, and I was very much clear in my path. I was going to go on and coach college baseball, but this was a good place to start. And my first couple years, really enjoyed it. I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it. And I was like, wow, this is clearly my path as far as coaching for sure. But I had a really strong connection with the kids, and I felt like. And then there was always a couple of them that's like, okay, I'm just going to wait till this person graduates. And once this person graduates, I'm going to go and do the next thing. And I thought I would go coach at a big public high school for a few years. And then after that, move to college. And so the amazing thing was once that kid X was going to graduate, now there was kid X, Y that were juniors. That I said, well, God, I can't leave now. I got to wait till these guys graduate. And that literally would happen every single year. Uh-huh. So even though I was really kind of resisting the urge of becoming full-time here, because I was working part-time and doing something else, I just really slowly, it took me about 6 years to finally say, okay, this is where I'm going to be. Uh-huh. And then even after that, I've been absolutely happy. I mean, this is my year 37, so I've been here for a long time, but there's been, probably a dozen times in my career to where I think most people always look forward and say, should I be doing something different? Should I be challenging myself in another way? And I often thought, Matt, wow, it'd be so amazing to coach phenomenal athletes or something and really see what your system could do somewhere else. But why I stayed, as part of your question, is the relationship with the students. And like you said, the impact that Sac Waldorf had on you in a brief period of time.
Yeah.
It's just, I have two older brothers that are in education, often would encourage me to go into public school education because of the benefits or the retirement or whatever. Mm-hmm. But the relationship with students that I have compared to what they had is not even close, So the depth of what I was experiencing, and hopefully imparting, I don't think that I could compare that anywhere else. And sponsorship also, which is kind of a somewhat unique thing to Waldorf education, that all of it combined was like, this is the place for me.
Yeah. What do you mean by the sponsorship? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so, in Waldorf school, you have the classroom teacher ideally from first grade through eighth grade. So that's a teacher that takes that group potentially for 8 years. And what an extraordinary experience. In the high school, we don't really have that, but you have generally 2 sponsors that will be with the class from the 9th grade through the 12th grade. And they interview all the prospective students. They kind of oversee the social dynamic, all the fundraising, class trips, all that thing. And so I stepped on as a sponsor in the fall of 92, and I've been sponsoring every year till current. So this is my 9th class that I've sponsored. And that just, again, the richness in relationship. And the one thing I always missed was, I get such a close relationship with my players. I kind of wanted to have that with more than just my players, and sponsorship allows that for me. So it's just another special part of the Waldorf experience that I think it kind of separates it from other institutions.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting too, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about, my husband has had one job in his career. He works at Wayne State University. He's an archivist in a library, and he loves it. And he plans to be there until he retires. And it's very similar to you. He didn't intend to be in one place, but he just sort of found his place, his passion, and he loves going to work every day. And I see that in you too. And so I want to ask you, I think the general American mentality is, keep moving up and keep moving on. And maybe that doesn't serve us well. I know in my parents' generation, having one job, one company, your whole career was not unusual. It's become so. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, about sort of even changing your perspective on your career because you found a place where you just feel like you fit and it's a match. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And it's an interesting question for me personally right now, because I'm getting to that age where, I'm starting to contemplate retirement. Right. And I have 3 older brothers. 2 of them have retired. The other one is on the brink of retirement. And so I see maybe I don't want to use the word negative, but the benefits of when the route that they went in their retirement, where one who was a probation officer for 30 plus years, dealing with not maybe the best element of society. But now he moved to Maui and he's walking on a beach every single day and he has a glorious retirement. So I'm like, okay, I know that, say what you want about Waldorf education, but the retirement is not great. So that's probably not an option for me is to spend my retirement years walking on a beach in Maui. So I feel like, okay, so maybe that, but on the flip side is he was in a career for almost 35 years that he didn't love. That he went to work, sometimes with a scowl on his face and just dealing with stuff to kind of get through it, and counted his days to the end and all of that stuff. And literally, I can show up and have, I almost wherever I walk on campus, I'm going to be greeted either by kindergartners that are going to be with their heads peeking over the fence saying, hi, Dean, or hi, coach, or something. And I can walk down to the 4th graders and 4th graders are waving at me, and I go to the high school and I got So it's just this embracing, feeling wherever you go that, and that's my day. That's a day in my life, that I get to live, year after year after year. So you can't put a value on that, so I never would have dreamt that it would be 37 years and counting.
Yeah.
And I do realize in the future that, who knows what's going to happen with retirement and how I navigate that. Fortunately, my wife does pretty well. So that's a piece of it. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, I've been given so much more than I could ever repay. So I'm very, very thankful for the path that I chose.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I know that over the years, you have melded your personal philosophies with Waldorf philosophies. And some of the things you said in your book that sort of lead me to that include these quotes. We have high expectations. We hold players accountable. We have a philosophy of sport, the why, the how. We show them what playing on a team can ultimately mean. Instead of dedicating one's life to sport, I want my players to dedicate their sport to life. So I wonder if you could walk me through these values a little bit and unpack them for me about how this Waldorf philosophy sort of pervades athletics as well as the other way around.
When I arrived again, and I would say this is not what I'm sharing about the Sacramento Waldorf experience. I don't think that's the Waldorf experience, worldwide. I think a lot of it is individual, and it depends on the nucleus of people that you have working at a particular institution. But
sure.
When I arrived, there wasn't a philosophy of sport, and it was like, yeah, everyone was thinking that participation was a good idea, but they really were like, wait a minute, we got to be careful with this because, this is an rigorous academic institution, and we don't want that to come in the way of their studies. So I really tried to instill what sports can be, and yes, there is going to be competition. Competition doesn't have to be bad. It can be brought in a way that really fosters the spirit of participation and those things. And it's okay to want to win. So I think that was another thing too with competition. Some people think win is a bad word, it says it doesn't matter, it does matter. I mean, it's striving to win is what matters. So I try to instill that, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to be serious. This is a commitment that we're going to make. This is a sacrifice that we're going to make. And you are going to be held accountable. The days of I can't make practice because I have to get my hair cut. Those days are over. It's like, right. If you're going to be on this team, you're going to fully commit. And one of the biggest challenges, because we still are at a no-cut sport, so you can participate in any sport that you want, and that's wonderful. But if it's just given to you and here's your uniform, Johnny or Susie, and you can come if not, or not show up if you're not getting everything that you can get from that offering. So for me, I was like, okay, yes, you're going to get a uniform, but you have to earn, the opportunity to wear it, being that I'm going to give them, they have to run a mile under a certain time, a 2 mile under a certain time, and a quarter mile under a certain time. And then when they do those things, that qualifies them for being able to be on the team to play. So they've earned something. And that's been an incredible success and I put the times that are difficult but doable. I've had every student accomplish it, every athlete that has done it. Some of them took 5 times to be able to do it, but they did it. And there was great camaraderie and spirit behind that with their teammates cheering them on when they're sprinting across the finish line or something. So accountability is really important. My guys know that they're never going to miss practice. Yeah. That the expectation is they're going to give me everything that they have. I'm very demanding. I think that they really appreciate that I speak the truth, that I don't sugarcoat. I'm not going to give them false praise. So they know when I give them compliments, wow, they really earned it. And I'm not above or afraid of getting on them if they're falling short of that, especially in the effort part. So I think that those things are really desperately needed, especially today, because there's not enough of that. I believe there's not enough of just like the hard truth. And it's okay to hear that, because that's what's going to, in my experience, inspire them to raise their level. So I think that philosophy of sport, of really accountability and commitment and sacrifice, and I give them examples of these things all the time, so they're hearing about how other people have done it, and I see the end result, and I get kids that when they graduate, they're in tears about speaking about their high school sports experience.
It's really interesting. There's so much there. And I was thinking about, I have 4 kids, they're teenagers, and my oldest was actually very involved in sports but he was never really athletic. And so he knew that he wasn't a natural born athlete, but he would have to work harder than everybody. And he would probably never be the fastest at whatever he was doing, but he put in so much heart and soul and effort. And it's interesting because I've seen teams where, the coaches are mean and hazing and it's a really toxic culture. I've seen teams where everybody gets an award, which also is not beneficial. And I coached my youngest son on soccer for 10 years when he was 4. So it was just like, let's go be outside and kick a ball around and just, look at the butterflies and whatever.
Yeah.
But over the years, as they grew older, it became more about teaching, sportsmanship and strategy and doing your best, even if it's not the best on the team, but everybody doing their best and really, rising to their potential. And it was always recreational soccer. And my younger son is quite a natural born athlete. He was the one I was coaching. And as he got older, when it was more appropriate, I asked him if he wanted to try out for a travel team, and he really didn't. And I said, that's cool. It's fine. We can say rec. And he plays for his high school now, but I liked that it was something that everybody could access, but they still had to put in that effort, because there's such a culture from a very young age that in so many communities that, you've got to get your kids into sports. They've got to be the best they can be. And most of these kids are never going to be professional athletes. And so, why are we spending thousands of dollars all the time and killing ourselves for what purpose? So you talk about this in your book, that so many kids in that sort of line of thinking burn out, and they don't love the sport, and they're not doing it for the right reasons, and then of course you look at Waldorf schools, a lot of them have sort of a strange relationship with sport, because there's this anti-competition mentality. And I do think that the healthiness is somewhere in the middle there. And so I just wonder if you have a perspective on, what do we need in American, childhood to change our sport perspective so that it's a little more reasonable and I guess accessible for most people.
That's really where the artistry of coaching comes in, I believe. So I think that the coaches that you have, it's so important that they are aligning themselves with the right characteristics and the right traits and the right goals for their team.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to win a league championship, right? And that's always going to be on one of my goals, but it's way down there. It's
mm-hmm.
like, I want to make the experience special for all of my players. And I think it's really easy to ask the star player about what was his experience, his or her experience, because it's great because they're playing every single game, they're playing all the minutes, they're taking all the big shots or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So their experience is probably good. But for me, I always looked at what are the kids that are making all of this sacrifice, all of this commitment, but aren't getting to play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And because and that's another thing which is somewhat controversial too, especially at Waldorf schools, is how come they should all play equally? And I understand the reasoning behind that, but I disagree with it. But I feel like, and we can get into that too. That's another conversation but I would love to talk about.
I'd go for it. I'd love to hear about it. Yeah.
Just with playing time it's not as simple as that, because if we call Billy and Bobby, Billy's whole life is basketball, and he's committing every single day in the off season, running and sprinting and lifting and shooting and doing all these things. And Bobby hasn't picked up a ball the entire summer. The only reason he's going to play in the game, wants to play on the team, is because it's good for his college resume. Then why does Billy and Bobby have to play equally when Bobby hasn't shown any commitment? So that's why it can't just be as simple as everyone is guaranteed playing time. No, you earn your playing time. And what I was going to say earlier was, and I'll just hopefully I can use this kid's name in public here, but Jaden Zwern, he's a senior. He's not the greatest athlete, and he's not the greatest basketball player. But he has a phenomenal attitude. He's never going to miss. He gives it his absolute all every single day. Everything you would want in a player. I'm getting a little choked up right now just thinking about him. And he's totally selfless, totally committed. It's all about the team. Now, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, his senior year was taken away from him, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't get to play. But that's what I'm looking for. And if I know that I can reach that kid, here's a kid that didn't get to play when the game was on the line, but he can still speak so fondly about his experience on the team and what the sport meant to him and the characteristics and traits that he will take on after high school. That's when your program is going in the right direction. So I look at the people that don't get a chance to play as much, but what is their experience still?
Yeah.
And then so that's how I kind of define our sports program.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel like that's when, regardless of what, that's how you can kind of determine what sports can be. And so I try to stay in that lane all the time to really look to see what is the experience my players are having.
Well, that actually leads into another question that I have on my list here. And, there's a statistic that you cite in your book that 45 million children play a team sport in their youth. And so I wanted to get your take on, what do you think kids get out of that experience, whether it's like a year in rec soccer or it's their whole childhood that they're playing different sports or whatever, or committing to one in a really serious way. What are those values or character traits or character development that youngsters get by participating in team sports?
I mean, there's the simple answers, and I almost hate to say them because I think every person that asks a question, they're going to almost immediately go, "Oh, there's time management and all that stuff." And it's true. I mean, you are going to learn to manage your time. You are going to learn to be more organized. You're going to have to maybe really think about sacrifice and what are you having to give up? Whether it's social time or whatever, and all that stuff is legit.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that again, it comes down to how serious are you. I really feel like like we've done these things where, in fact, we're just doing one. In my book, I write about a Muskogee where we did a 20-week competition where they had to write out their goals and set their commitment. And this is what they were going to do every day for 20 weeks. And it was this phenomenal thing. So we're doing this one. And it turned out we had the pandemic. We didn't get to play. But now I'm doing this thing is called our Vision Quest. Our Vision Quest 21-22, which is brand new, just started this month. And it's not going to be the same intensity of every day, but it's far reaching. It's 6 months. What are you going to do over these 6 months? How are you going to be a different person from May 3rd to November 1st, because November 1st is our first day of basketball if we have a season next year. And how are you going to change? And then if these are the things that you're going to change, how are you going about doing it? And it's these things that really that make lifelong changes in somebody, because that's when they start to realize, wow, if I really can commit to something, if I do set these goals and I can accomplish this. I had somebody come back after 20 weeks, he was 20 pounds lighter and he was on top of the world because it was the first time in his life that he truly committed to something. He had the will forces to do it. He had the camaraderie around him to keep him focused instead of just quitting because he was tired of it. So it's trying to create scenarios where a group can do something together, looking at something bigger than themselves. So those are the areas that's when I think that sports is just the vehicle of it, but you can really start to shape your career because of the commitments that you're making and the discipline that you're having in your life currently.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot when I was reading your book about this. So I'm a word nerd. So the word coach, I was like sort of playing with it and thinking about it. And, there's this huge trend right now toward personal coaching. So people becoming a life coach or, in some way, working with people in that capacity. So it's like not therapy, but it's not consulting. It's, it's kind of interesting. And I was thinking about using that term coach. So that's not an athletic pursuit. It's, helping you with your career, your life, or something like that. And I was wondering about that. And I wanted to ask you, I know it's a little bit off topic, but it made me wonder what a coach's true role is, because in that capacity, it's to sort of reflect and guide, but not to tell someone what to do necessarily, just to sort of be sort of that shaper of the path or that kind of thing. So from the actual role that you've been playing as a sports coach, how would you say, how would you define a coach's role? Is it telling people how to play the game? Like, are you on the sidelines? Because I haven't seen you coach in person. I've watched videos, but I haven't been there. So is it, yelling out what they should be doing on the court? Or is it empowering? Like, tell me a little bit about what you think like a good coach's role really is.
Yeah, well, there's certainly more than one way. And there's people that are very different that have great successes. And so I think whatever it is, it needs to be true to you. It needs to be real to you. So whatever fits your personality. But it's interesting that you asked that question because nobody calls me coach. I mean, well, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people. I mean, they all call me Dean, and I'm not one of those, I never wear a whistle, So you think of the stereotype, of a coach, he's got a whistle and he's barking out stuff. So, and not to say that's good or bad. It just never was felt like it was me. So,
Mm-hmm.
and trust me, I think a coach, that's a great thing to be called. I think a coach, there's a lot of qualities in that. So for me, I guess why I'm not called coach, because I've always wanted to be more than that. I think that what it really comes down to, I want them to think of me as not just their coach. To me, that's sports. Coach is the sports. And I know you're life coach, and it's expanding that definition, but at the high school setting, it's kind of been coach is sports. And I'm also that mentor. I'm also that counselor. I'm also that advisor. I'm also that sponsor. I'm also that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That I want them to come to me with maybe their personal challenges or their hopes or their dreams or their struggles, and I want them to see me that way. And I do believe that a great coach's responsibility is to inspire. And I feel like it's probably one of the areas I would like to believe that's one of my greatest assets as a coach. And I also feel like it's what keeps many of the coaches from truly achieving what they could as a coach. Because there's a lot of coaches that know X's and O's and know the fundamentals of things and know how to teach them really well.
Mm-hmm.
But who can inspire that person so they have a vision that they want to be this because of what is out there. So I try to give them visual aids all the time about, why are we doing this? What can you be? What can this experience be like? So to me, a coach has so many opportunities to impact. And it's just a matter of just taking the time to how can I connect with that kid, and thinking, a little bit. And I try to do that as much as I can when I have free moments. Okay, I'm just going to reach out to so-and-so today just because I want them to know that I really care. So to me, that is really a big part of it is they need to know that you really care about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you said in the beginning of the interview, that it's relationships. It's relationships you can have with the students, and it's person to person. I mean, it's priceless. I think that's a beautiful way to say it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you can share with me a little bit about some of the routines and practices that help you be your best and that you model for your players. I know that you hike, and I know that you have your own sort of fitness regimen and sort of how you live your life as an example.
Yeah.
And then teaching others how to do that.
Okay. And this could be a little controversial. This works for me. And I realize everyone has their stuff. And I have a lot of physical baggage as far as 4 knee surgeries, back surgery, I had a neck that was tweaked. And I've had all of these things. So, but having said that, being a former athlete and I'm a PE teacher, and I've been a fitness professional before. I've been a personal trainer, and I'm so the fitness industry is really important to me. I've always wanted to be a role model. So to me, I believe that it's impactful, and I know that it's been impactful, that my players know that I'm not asking them to do stuff that I never would do, or I'm not doing currently, or I haven't done before.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do when we set our goals for a season, and then I send them on a big, like a 2 to 3 mile run straight uphill of a mountain in Tahoe or somewhere. And we get up to the absolute top and we speak our goals to the world and this panoramic view, which is unbelievable, right? Well, I'm up there too, so it's not like I'm just going to be, I'll see you guys at the van, in 5 hours. No, it's like, so I'm doing all of that stuff, and I tell them what my Misogi is going to be. And then I do some really challenging physical things because my body is still able to do that. So that for me, one is because I love it and it's just kind of my lifestyle. They know that, hey, the coach is doing this too. So this is real. So I think they really respect that. I don't know how I could do it if I was undisciplined in my personal life and I'm preaching to my players to be disciplined.
Yeah.
I just think it would fall on deaf ears, so they know that I'm super disciplined in my life, and I'm asking them to be super disciplined. So I feel like they really, they connect with it.
And they see you setting goals too. So,
Absolutely.
For the team, for the season, and for yourself. And I think that's a great example as well, so that it helps them to know the importance of setting goals for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So on this show, we talk a lot about how people find meaning in work and purpose in life. And I wonder if you have any last thoughts, any advice for our listeners about, how can they go in pursuit of, what their role should be, what their purpose is. And I know you've always loved coaching and sports, but who knew that you were going to be at Zach Waldorf all these years?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what advice might you offer our listeners, to go in pursuit of their own passion and their place?
Yeah, I think, well, hopefully this is going to be some good advice. I mean, the listener will have to decide for that, but I'm always striving to get better, right? So every year, okay, how can I improve myself as a coach or whatever? And I was reading a book from Pete Carroll, who was the coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And it was a book that I believe is called Winning Forever. Mm-hmm. And so I'm reading it, and it just, something stopped me dead in my chest. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. Mm-hmm. And basically his story was, he was reading a book on John Wooden, the mm-hmm. famous coach for UCLA Bruins. And mm-hmm. he came up with the pyramid of success, which many people have probably in their audience have heard about that. It's a philosophy of sport and coaching by John Wooden. That's kind of like the gospel in the coaching world. When Pete Carroll read that, his kind of aha moment went, oh my God, this is what I need to do for myself, because most coaches, when they're asked, what's your philosophy? I could give you right now my philosophy, and I could just, and it might sound pretty good. And then tomorrow you could ask me the same question and I would say it, and it might be a little bit different. And that always bothered me, that just depending on the day and depending on how articulate I am that day, the mm-hmm. words are going to come out however they are. Mm-hmm. And I wanted something that was a little more concrete. So what Pete Carroll did was he decided to create his own pyramid of success with his philosophy of coaching. And so he spent about the next 6 months and just studying and doing things and looking back on his career and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And he created this document, and that was really a powerful moment for me to say, you know what, I have John Wooden's pyramid of success on my wall right now. And I would look at it on a regular basis, but all it was a document. Then it was signed by him, because I fortunately got to meet him, but it was just a document that it was nice to read, but it didn't have any personal connection to me. So when I decided to do that myself, what is my philosophy of coaching? What is my philosophy of sport? Mm-hmm. And I did the same thing. I spent a couple of months of really kind of looking back on my career and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I created my own pyramid of success, which is in my book. Mm-hmm. And that has been a really powerful moment for me. And it really even though I was already 29 years into my coaching career, mm-hmm. I basically started anew. Mm-hmm. And I say that in people that are trying to find meaning and passion in their life or whatever, you could do this for anything. You could do it for exercise. You could do it for just physical well-being. You could do it for your professional career. You could mm-hmm. do it for a relationship. You could do it for what do you want to do in your future. So I really put down on paper, what are the non-negotiables for me as a coach? What's the environment that I want to create mm-hmm. For my players? And what are the things that have to happen on a daily basis for me to be successful? Mm-hmm. And just as a final note on that, I mean, not that the scoreboard is the greatest indicator of anything, but I did that, before the 2016 season, and 2016, 17, 18, and 19, all 4 of those years, we were league champions. 2 of them, we were undefeated league champions. We went to the section finals twice. We went to the Final Four every single year, ranked in Northern California in the top 5. So we did some pretty extraordinary things every single year by instilling this philosophy. And so I really believe anybody to really sit down and reflect on one's life and say, okay, now what has been great for me? What has really served me? What mm-hmm. hasn't? Mm-hmm. And then what would you want it to be? Sure. And take the time to create that. And then when you have it, you got to live by it. And so that to me has been an incredible process for me.
Awesome. Well, Dean Stark, thank you so much for being on the Make Meaning podcast. It's such a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, well, again, I really appreciate the time given. So thank you very much, Lynn.
Thanks for listening to the Make Meaning podcast with Lynn Golodner. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like what you've heard here, join us over at makemeaning.org to discover how you can add more meaning to your life. And hey, if you like our conversations, please subscribe and share this episode with the meaningful people in your world.